Hey, Sunday night, we want winners. We're like 5 or 6 days away from the first preseason game against the Titans. How crazy is that?
That is after a whole year. It's finally here. It's awesome.
Are you? Does it feel like football to you yet? Or are you still kind of like it's not there yet?
Not quite. I watched some of the Hall of Fame game, and then I didn't watch any of the the presentations except for Patrick's. So I don't know. It does. And you know what? A big difference this year is haven't done any training camp. So that
I was
last
gonna ask you,
year
yeah.
was that really got the juices flowing. Just seeing the guys out there. And you know last year there were a bunch of storylines, and this year too. With Sorensen and all of the changes on the defensive line and the no changes on the offensive line. So there's a lot that I would have liked to have seen out there. But I'm ready for it, but I think the games will start to make it real.
Yeah. That it will. But I guess the thing that's weird, and I think it's going to keep being like this, is now with the 17 game season, they're talking about moving to 18. And now the preseason is literally going to be practice and then a couple of games or a handful of games. Whereas when we were younger, I think 4 was the minimum.
Mm-hmm.
And so you just got to see your big players play and kind of get ready, and
Mm-hmm.
we're not going to have that much
Not
with the
anymore.
way that football works right now.
Not anymore. Like you say, it was like back in the day. Even if they were like protecting them, and it was an older team, you got at least like a half the first game, and then like they say, the second game was like the dress rehearsal, or the third game, depending on how it went. When it was 4 games, and then the starters really didn't play in the last game. But now it's going to be that way. I wouldn't expect to see Brock or CMC or Debo. I wouldn't expect to see those guys at all. It would shock me if they played much at all anymore. It's just it's a weird thing.
Yeah, Shelvin says he hasn't been interested really either. And the other thing is what we just said about CMC and Brock not playing is when we were younger, you would actually see like maybe half of the game from the starters, like
Mm-hmm.
in the third game, and you kind of had a good feeling. Now they weren't necessarily playing to win or lose, but
Mm-hmm.
you had a pretty good feeling on how certain folks looked. I have a feeling we're not going to know until game one whether this offensive line is going to be worth a darn, and whether or not the new additions to the defensive line are going to be helpful. Like we're just not. You kind of go into week one unknowing, and the only thing you have are the eyes and ears of the beat writers who have been to training camp.
Yeah. And even that, I have come to find, not just here but around the country, as I just watch um those reports, is it those aren't always though they aren't always the most what's the word I'm looking for? Unbiased is not the word. They're not the most reliable narrators,
Mm.
because oftentimes I believe, they have clicks and shit that they're trying to get, and there are agendas that sometimes are forwarded by the team, which that gets tricky. You know, it always seems best to me if there's like an adversarial relationship between the team and the media. In a way, you might get closer to the truth, but when it's really buddy, and sometimes in a lot of these media areas, the beat writers are just extended, PR for the team, and that gets weird because it seems like they are putting forth an agenda that the team wants put out there, which can be for a lot of different reasons. It's not, just journalism in general is not what it used to be.
So I guess that kind of leads us into our first topic, which is a continuation of the last time we had a conversation, which was the Brandon Aiyuk thing. And, you and I have actually seen each other in person before the last time, or since the last time we recorded. But so that was cool to go hang out at the ball game.
Yeah.
And so the last time we recorded, I think we both thought that either by now or soon the Aiyuk thing was going to be resolved. But, and as Shelvin just pointed out, some of there's actual real conversation about a trade happening, which, as we've been talking about, just does not make any sense for the 49ers. Because if a trade was something that they wanted to do or they thought was the right thing to do, the time to have done it was before the draft rather than now, because picks would have to be involved. And then those picks don't even happen until next year. So you basically lose a full year of Aiyuk, don't get anything in return unless there's a player involved. And then the actual return doesn't even count really until next year, which is why it doesn't really make sense.
And I've got real thoughts on this. Excuse me. I understand just as a fan base, and you see it even with the media. You see these trade scenarios, and it's like, I don't know, from my standpoint, on August 4th, if I'm the Patriots, let's say, why on earth am I making a Godfather offer to the 49ers for Brandon Aiyuk? I mean, it doesn't make sense for me to like go all in when clearly they are don't wanters at this point. So, and I say that about the fans and the media is we're always talking about how the teams are gonna, empty out their cash for the, cash of picks or whatever players for this guy, which he might have that value, but why would they do that now? I wouldn't, I know I wouldn't. If I'm talking about, 50 cents, a quarter, 25 cents on the dollar at this point for what it is. Plus, I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, but it seems to me that his market is fairly fixed. If I were to wait until next offseason, he's played out his contract, they franchise him, the max I have to pay for him in trade is 2 first-round picks, right? I mean, I don't even have to negotiate with the 49ers. I sign him, they get 2 firsts, business is over. So that is the ceiling to me for a trade. Why would I pay that now? I mean, Devontae Adams, the Raiders, the Packers only got a first and a second for him, because the Raiders knew that they didn't want to pay him. They weren't going to pay him. And you could make the case that they probably could have held out and got less, but that's where he wanted to be. Carr wanted him to be there, so they wanted to go ahead and get it done. So again, I just think that I can't imagine that the Patriots or the Steelers or Washington or any of these places would be willing to pay that much for him. And then even if I wanted to, I would want to dictate how you got those picks. Okay, man, you get a second next year and then maybe the first in 2026. And the way that calculation works is that the further out the pick is, the less valuable it is. A first round pick 2 years from now, who the hell knows what that's going to be? And plus, we talk about the fact that this is a Super Bowl team, and they need the player more right now in August. They need the player more than they need the picks. I mean, the picks will be great next year, but those don't do anything to help you get to New Orleans this year.
Here's another question I have, which is, does it benefit the 49ers to trade him knowing that whatever trade value they get back doesn't even impact this team? Or do they just have him, if he wants to hold out, they could have him hold out and they would not lose. They would lose him just like if they traded him. But I wonder if they believe his value would decrease at all because of a full holdout. That's the part where I don't think it would. So I don't think that it would benefit the Niners to trade him if the risk is either trade him or he sits. I would just rather have him sit because you don't get anything until next year anyways. You might as well take that risk and take that bluff.
Well, the only thing I would say to push back on that is, and again, it's something that's not measured. If you are a Super Bowl team and he seems to be a beloved player, how does that affect the psyche of the team? Is just having him either, because if it's me and I'm not holding out and losing money, I'm going to be in the building. Man, my hamstring is just tight. I'll be available for the last 6 games of the season because that's how you have to. If you play or are available for 6 games, you get a year's credit, unless they suspend him, which that gets tricky because you get service time. If he's suspended or if he's on IR, he gets service time for that. If the team decides they don't want him around, he doesn't get penalized. He's supposed not to get penalized. They could decide not to try to pay him, and then that goes to mediation. But then I doubt that they would win that. And that's my thing, is with a team that is so poised and ready to make a Super Bowl run, I don't know that you just, as a team, you want that taint in the building. Maybe I'm just, Pollyannish, and that doesn't matter. It's a business, and they're going to do business things, and the emotion doesn't mean anything. But my experience is that the emotion in football does matter. It's a really, those guys, they're out there. We saw it 2 years ago or 3 years ago at this point. I can't remember. Damar Hamlin, those dudes literally, we say it, but those dudes literally are putting their lives on the line out there.
It was last year.
That's crazy. That's crazy that it seems such a long time ago. But yeah, I mean, those guys, they are literally putting their lives on the line. And that's why you hear all the comments from the players is that they understand the business part of it, because they're, but for whatever, that could be me at some point. And for a lot of those guys, it has been them. Debo has talked about it. I understand exactly what he's going through. So does George. So does Nick. So it's, and they all, to a man, seem to respect his stance that, you go out there and get that money. I heard Warner talk about that we need him, but he's got to get his bread. So how does that play in the locker room that, this is how he's been a guy that's kind of done everything they've asked him to do. He does the dirty work. He doesn't complain about the fact that, because he's a guy who, you look at the people that are above him in terms of receivers, the only reason Amon-Ra St. Brown is a perfect example. He just gets more targets than Aiyuk because of this. He doesn't really have the type of target share competition that he does, but he doesn't seem to complain about he doesn't get enough touches. He goes out there, he does the dirty work. It would seem that would be the kind of guy that you would want to pay and that you would want to pair with Brock, who's on the verge of, a huge extension. Just based on his skill profile and his age, he seems like the perfect guy to pair with Brock moving forward. But for whatever reason, they don't seem to be of that accord. So, that it is what it is. So if you just want to get out of the Aiyuk business, then I guess a trade makes sense, but it's gonna be at a discount. At this point, I just don't see how it wouldn't be.
I still think there's a lot of poker being played right now, and I always harken back to this one, and we've mentioned it on this show a couple times. Cowboys win the Super Bowl. Emmett holds out. They lose the first 2 games, and they pay him. Not to say that the 49ers are going to start, if they were to start the season without him, that they would just immediately lose their first 2 games. But this essentially, this thing could go into the season, and you could still, you could still come to agreement. The one that is not surprising, but this player is of more value is Trent Williams, and I don't sense the anxiety from the 49ers on this one. Maybe they don't mind him missing this time because he is a vet. He doesn't really need the preseason as much as some of the other players.
He doesn't work anyway, really.
Yeah, they could probably just tell him, okay, week 1, let's go.
And he's damn sure not playing any preseason.
No, he's not at all. I mean, it may save his legs just to not stand on the sideline for those games. So, but this one doesn't sound like there's too much worry here. And it's almost like
because they have to pay him.
Well, it's kind of like it's an agreement. It's like, yeah, we'll do this, in the beginning, right before we need to get it done, and you're not going to play anyway. So let's just, we'll just agree to wait and do this.
I think that's the one that is more analogous to the example that you laid out there, because I don't think they have an appetite at all for seeing Jalen Moore play 70 snaps week 1. I just, I don't, that is a situation where that is very analogous to the Emmitt Smith. If he is not out there, this team is drastically worse.
Well, Tim Kawakami on his podcast said, if Trent Williams isn't on this team, he doesn't think the 49ers are contenders for the Super Bowl. And I mean, I don't, anything could happen, but it would definitely I think that their Super Bowl odds would go down drastically.
Oh yeah, definitely
the day that he doesn't sign.
Detroit would definitely leapfrog the Niners as a favorite in the NFC for sure. If that were to come to pass, if he starts missing games, it's just, we've seen it. We've seen this show. We are just simply not as good when he's not out there. Our running game, the splits left to right are cartoonish. KMC is so much more effective running to the left than he is to the right, and that is in a situation where teams know that we're going to do it, and behind Trent, there's nothing. They're powerless to stop it. They can't. They just can't. So, I think that and I think the whole retirement thing, that risk is overblown. The dude has said on the record that he plans on playing out the length of that of his contract, which would take him to year 39. And I just think that when you're talking about Hall of Fame level players, it's different. Whitworth is the most recent example. He retired at 40, and he was an All-Pro in his 40 season. So I just think that those Hall of Fame Aaron Donald is another one who just retired, was long in the tooth apparently, but was playing great football. I just think that you can't judge those guys. Oh, he's 35, 36. The end is nigh. I think those dudes are different. I really do think that, especially there's a long standing history of those high level players Matthews, Munoz. Those guys, they play well on, and they're because they're just so much better than everybody else. So if they don't get hurt, which hell, anybody could get hurt. That could be the justification for not paying anybody. Is, well, he could get hurt. Well, shit, anybody on any given play could get hurt. So that just doesn't hold water. I just think you have to pay him. And if you do something like you did with CMC, is you guarantee this year and next. Because I don't know that many fans look at the contracts as closely as I do. That's all CMC's extension was. You could throw out all those numbers about average value of the contract, length of the contract. Really, what his deal is, this year's fully guaranteed, next year's fully guaranteed. His base in 2026 drops below what his base was this year. So basically in 26, we have to do this all over again. He doesn't have any guaranteed money. His base is super low. He's going to want a bump, but he'll be 30 at that point. So they just kick that can down the road. I don't see why you just don't do something like that with Trent. Now, the question is his team amicable to go 1 or 2 years at a time like that? Or are they trying to cash in and get a deal like Worth's got? Again, at 36, as a 49er, as a team, I could see not wanting to give that kind of guaranteed money 4 years out to a guy that's 36. I don't know, but I think that is what the question is how we're going to pay him and how much we're going to pay him. I don't think, him not getting, I don't think I don't think he goes into week 1 without any guaranteed money. That's just crazy. I don't see that. He's still an all-pro tackle. I mean, it's unfathomable to me.
By the way, shout out to Papa J, who is in the live stream as well. So if you're Trent, you're tying the next 2 years to, hey, if I'm done, good luck. You got this young quarterback who's going to be the highest paid player in the league next year. He's going to be better with me. Like, there is a strategy for Trent here. There is, the strategy, I would say even more than BA. BA is looking at all of the deals of players in the same realm as him and just seeing the market explode. I get that. For BA, it is the wide receiver market has exploded, and I'm trying to catch that wave and not get left behind there. For Trent, it's like, I can play. I love to play. I don't have to play. But if you want to be good and you want this offense to work, I might be the most valuable guy in making that work. So that's my leverage there.
Is more team specific. Is his T2 has a market argument that I'm one of the best players. I should be paid at the top of market. That's BA's thing. But you could make the argument. I think it's crazy if you think that Purcell is going to come in and take BA's 125 targets as a rookie. I think that's nuts. But I guess you could make that argument, or you could make the argument that he slots in. We spread a little bit more to CMC, although they say they don't want to do that. We give Debo a little more. We give Kittle a little more. We can make do without BA. There's no such argument for Trent. We're talking. We've seen the Jalen Moore show. It's not that good, and we've done kind of a horrible job. It doesn't get talked about much, but we've kind of done a horrible job of developing. They've drafted players.
Okay, so what did you think? Now, what did you think of the comments that Kyle made? I believe it was on Tim Kawakami's podcast about the offensive line and the way that they look at putting that offensive line together. And I'm paraphrasing here, but it was essentially like, I've put together offensive lines in the past with non-first round draft picks, and we were completely fine. And so it sounds like the strategy, or at least in Kyle's brain, is, the players, QB1, top wide receiver, top defensive end, those are the guys you pay, and everyone else you can sort of fit in, including the offensive line. And that goes back to what you were just saying. They haven't done a great job, and they haven't really targeted any top talent in the draft when it comes to offensive line.
Well, my thing is, it makes sense for Kyle because he figures he can scheme his way around those dudes, and that's fine. And it works until it doesn't. It works until you've got Chris Jones in the biggest game of the season out here just destroying and wrecking you can't block him. So, I mean, like I said, that's great.
Dom Puny, baby. Dom Puny's here to take it to them.
It works until it doesn't. So that's, and if so it just, again, it's one of those things where, are we just trying to be holistic and we're putting together a good football team like the Ravens? That seems like the Ravens strategy under Ozzie Newsome and on into with DeCosta. They just seem to want to be a good football team every year, and then maybe 2 or 3 times, every 3 or 4 years, they have a shot at winning the Super Bowl. So if you just want to be consistently good for 10 years, I think that's great. I don't think that strategy gives you the best opportunity to win the Super Bowl in any given season. And now one could say that, okay, I'm playing the result in the fact that we haven't been able to get over the hump. But it stands. That's a fact. That's a fact that we have gotten into situations where the fact that we didn't have any depth, or we hadn't developed the depth, or we hadn't developed the talent in such a way that we could compete at the highest level, it cost us. It cost us against the Rams. It cost us against Kansas City both times. I can't argue with his regular season success. I can't argue with his playoff success. He's gotten to the NFC Championship, and he's gotten to the Super Bowl. There are 30 other teams that would kill to be in Kyle's position. But at a certain point, it has to be about winning a championship, I think. Maybe, or maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But I just don't see, Aaron Banks. He was good his first year. He took a step back last year. Brindle is fine. I happen to think that you have to get a bigger center if Brock is going to be your quarterback. You can't. He's too small, and you can't have shit in Brock's face. He shouldn't have to deal with that. Because we've seen it. You're going to pay him. Injuries happen, but we've seen it. We can't have that dude taking big hits. He's just not built that way. So I believe you have to build that. Burford is a disaster. Feliciano was better, but how long is that gonna work? And then McKivitz, again, he is on the verge of being as bad as Burford. So okay, it works. He's able to make it work. He's able to funnel everything to Trent in the run game. He's able to, rely on his scheme and Brock to get the ball out of his hand. And that's great in the regular season. But again, when you get to those high leverage moments, dudes like Spagnuolo and, that staff in Detroit, and then that staff in Green Bay, there are some good teams that can exploit that weakness. And I don't think that is a sound plan to think that, I'm just going to scheme it and I'm going to leave it in Brock's hands to protect himself. It works until it doesn't. So we'll see.
We'll talk about something a little bit more fun here in a second, but one thing based on what you just talked about, and I have to imagine that when you are as knowledgeable about football as Kyle is, as good at your job as Kyle is, you kind of see yourself as the get out of jail free card. There's a little bit of hubris involved, I think, when you have a really smart coaching staff, a smart front office. It's almost like, hey, if this thing doesn't work out for us, we will figure it out because we're just smarter than everybody else. It's the Joe Lacob theory, right? We're light years ahead of everybody else. I do wonder, because what you just said makes a lot of sense, which Kyle believes that, okay, if we have this one area where we're not strong, we can figure out how to cover for that area in most times. Can you be a little too smart for your own good in that way? Because we've seen that happen over the years. You could say that happened to Bill Belichick, and it might be why Bill Belichick is not in New England and is not kind of the favored son there anymore. There were moments where he thought, okay, like I'm still the best option to both coach this team and to understand the personnel in today's NFL. And thus I can just do this job. And that's essentially what I'm not going to say it passed him by, but he had a few bad drafts in a row, and it really affected the roster on that football team.
Oh yeah, Bill, and that's one thing that I know most people didn't watch any Patriots last year, but he was still as sharp as ever coaching the defense of that team. That by the end of the season, even without Judon and Rodriguez, their two best players, they were first in the league in points allowed. They were really good. The GM Bill Belichick let down Coach Belichick. That's it, point blank, period. Because I don't, in terms of putting together the game plan and taking away as an offense what you want to do, there's still nobody better in the world at that than Bill Belichick. Like you said, offensively, especially, GM Bill Belichick let them down, because you could see even last year with his defense, he took just a bunch of guys and was able to shut down teams at the end of the season. He is still that dude as far as that's concerned. The other problem is, do you want Bill Belichick running your organization? Do you want him, allowing Matt Patricia to run the offense? Do you want him selecting your players? Those are the decisions that were really questionable on his part, that I wouldn't feel comfortable with. That you're gonna, when you bring him in, you bring the most successful coach in NFL history, but you bring all these other clowns that he has on his staff. That, somebody, I heard it was probably Bill Simmons that said the thing about New England, and he was there so long, has so much institutional knowledge. He had people talk about the fact that once he was out of the building, there was so much shit that he was making happen that people didn't even know he had his hands on. And then once he's gone, there's like all these fires that break out that nobody knew about, because he had such a tight rein on everything that he was just delegating and making these things happen. But with him not at the wheel, there was nobody that even knew that these things were issues. And that's the kind of thing that I could see where a team would hesitate to, sign up for that, because, I would love to have him in the building as a coach, like the Shanahan, him reaching out. That would have been excellent, even if he's just in that, like that same capacity that they ended up putting my man in Staley, and not actually, like on the field making calls. I would if he would be worth the money just to have him there Tuesday through Thursday for game planning and breaking down the other team and doing that. But is he going to do that? Really? Is he going to be Kyle's, right hand? I just don't see him answering to anybody but an owner. And I don't think he respects the owner necessarily. I mean, he signs the checks and I guess he understands the power dynamic. But at the end, it seemed like he didn't even respect Kraft. And they had been through all of it together. And it's just a weird thing that
I think he saw Kraft trying to take a little bit more credit.
Yeah. All those guys, I mean, that's the ego of the business. That's what the push and pull between DeBartolo and Walsh was about. That was what the push and pull between Jones and Jimmy was about. The guys who like write these checks, they believe that, they are the reason, which is, it's ridiculous. But you have to kind of figure out a way to if you're the coach, you have to figure out a way to give them some respect and deference. What you can't do is be like Harbaugh with young Jed. You just did not respect him at all. You're not one of my favorite quotes of all time is you're not man enough to be in this meeting room. Wow, just say that to your boss. That's
No,
that's pretty bold.
no.
That's pretty bold.
And the thing about it is, and this is not something that we usually talk about when it comes to coaches. Usually, what we talk about when it comes to coaches is, at some point the audience kind of loses the focus of the coach. The verbiage doesn't mean as much anymore, even though there's so much turnaround on rosters these days. You would think that maybe that would help the longevity of the coaches as long as they're doing a good job. But the other part of it is, working for somebody. It's got to be tiresome to work for somebody. Some of these owners are old white dudes who, have been rich for most of their lives. So,
and we're successful at other things,
and
so
not even saying that they don't work hard or that they like all that. I'm sure most of them do actually work hard, but it's like the idea that, oh, I'm rich means like I'm successful, which means I'm smart. And that sometimes can be the case, sometimes cannot. But do you want to deal with somebody who is writing checks for a roster and a team and believes that they are, not say they aren't of value, but that they have just as much value as, maybe the player? Because I mean, you just look at some of these, like I'm not saying that I'm not saying this is a Jed versus Aiyuk scenario. Jed has his guy Parag who is there to, handle this side of business. But if you are an owner and you have a player who is basically saying, I'm not getting paid enough, the owner could look at that and go, well, man, I've taken care of this guy. I've done everything. I say hi to his wife every time I see him. I I love the kid. And it's almost like, how dare him do that to me? Instead of thinking like, okay, this is business, and what we do when we have to cut 50 players is also business. Yeah. I think there's some interesting interpersonal relationships in franchises that we probably don't even realize exist, or that frustration happens. And because like your example of Belichick and Kraft is the perfect one. These guys could deal with each other when they're in the Super Bowl every year. And the second that they're not in the Super Bowl together every year, then they can't deal with each other anymore.
Yeah. It's, I think that is something that is kind of lost on fans because it's not something that's talked about enough. The NFL, it really is. I believe that all business is, but that definitely, it's a relationship business. You are managing relationships all up and down the line. Used to talk about that with Harbaugh. They talked about it here. They talked about it at Stanford. They talked about it at Michigan. That throughout the building, he just gets to a point where it's like scorched earth where everybody has a story and everybody's been burned. And it's just, he's hard on the staff. And that's what, so when you talk about them having shelf lives, that is more so than even the players. It's when the building, it gets toxic because of the way the guy goes about his business. I see, and that was the talk with Walsh, is that it was so impersonal and cutthroat that it's hard to build, like an esprit de corps when everybody knows that it's all performance based with him. And if the moment you stop performing, you're out of here. But my thing is, if you're consistent with that, the problem is when Eddie D is talking this family shit.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
we're all one big family, but Bill is over here bottom line in it. Those two messages are incongruent, and that is what can create problems.
That's the Steve and Joe thing in a nutshell, right there.
Yep.
Eddie D never wanted Joe to be replaced, and Bill thought he was going to have a longer shelf life and the team would win more games if they figured out a way to bring in Steve Young sooner than later, because that was sort of where he thought football was going, someone who could run and who could throw.
And let's be real, as much as I love Joe, he's my favorite quarterback ever. He had been banged up several times, and he was so integral to what it is we did. No matter how good Steve Bono was or the backup de jour, we went as Joe went. And if Joe got knocked out, it was a wrap. That was it. It was just not going to happen. So him bringing in Steve Young to have him as the backup, and then you just, as Joe gets older, you figure he's going to get banged up more and more. Walsh was very pragmatic, but I could see, and I was of the same accord with Eddie. With all that Joe has done, he has the right to run his course. However that ends up, we are not going to be in the situation where we're talking about replacing Joe Montana every season. It just doesn't make any sense. But Bill Walsh was like, shit, Billy Ray Smith, I'll trade him for Billy Ray Smith. What? Are you crazy?
Now, if you gave, now Joe would never say this, and I don't think Steve Young drinks. If you gave Steve Young a little bit of truth serum, I wonder if Steve Young thinks that because he was on that roster on Joe's heels, that gave Joe a lot of fight to play as well as he did those last few years.
100%. Him being the competitor he is, and the famous story that Steve Young tells about his daughter saying, "Is that the guy that you hate?"
Yeah.
So I'm sure, the Rocky IV scene where Drago is in the mirror on Rocky's bathroom wall.
Yeah.
I'm sure Joe Montana had a picture of Steve Young, and every time he's doing his workouts and he's doing his lifting, he's like, Steve Young. He's, I'm sure that got him all hyped up. And I don't know if he told that story at that last gala when Matt Mayeko was hosting. Steve Young told the story about when he came in and when Walsh traded for him. He was like, Joe had back surgery. I don't even know if he's going to be ready for the season. So Steve was like, he's ready to go. He gets out the first day of practice, and Joe's out there running around throwing the ball, and he's like, "Coach, he doesn't look hurt to me." And he said, Walsh just said, so yeah.
Papa J said, towards the end of Joe's career, his elbow looked like it was pregnant.
Yeah,
it did. It totally did.
Yeah.
All right, let's switch gears here. Let's talk about Patrick Willis goes into the Hall of Fame. Not to say that I was surprised that he made it, because he was all pro almost immediately out of the gate and almost right through the end of his career. But because he only played 9 years, I wondered if that was going to be held against him a little bit. And it wasn't. Like he's out there, and it's one of these things where, when I was a little kid and you think of all the people who are making the Hall of Fame, and you're like, man, those guys are old. And then now people make the Hall of Fame and they're like 10 years younger than me. I'm like, what the hell happened? How did that happen? They're supposed to be
him
older
and Pep
than me.
are, and they all, Pep and Patrick, they look great. They look like, they could still go out there and play. So that's good to see. Man, I was so, it took me back, because those were the teams, I've been a fan since, 83.
Yeah.
But
that's probably the first season that I remember watching Fort football too.
Those teams were, I started, I had a better job and I started having bread, so I could come back up here from Vegas and go to the Stick and see, those Alex Smith led teams with Harbaugh. And that was like the first thing, because my mom didn't have money to like let me go to games when I was, young like that. So those teams were really the teams that I really connected with. Frank is probably like my favorite player because he was like the leader of that team. But Willis and Cowboy and Bowman, those were my guys. Those are even, the OGs like Lott and Montana. Those are, obviously, that's Mount Rushmore.
Those are the posters we had on our walls.
Yeah, but I don't know. Like I say, Patrick Willis and Frank, and I don't know. It just hit different. It was those guys. I felt like a real connection. I would, if I were to equate it to like family, those, the OGs are like, my uncles and stuff, and that's fine. But my cousins are who like I like. We hung out and we bonded together. We did shit together. It would it would be the football analogy to that. I really felt connected to them in that way. So it really felt good to see Patrick Willis get his flowers. And a couple thoughts. One, that was a wonderful ceremony, and I have vowed that when Frank goes in, I'm going to Canton for that. I want to experience that once. Navarro Bowman, I was looking up his stats. He was surprisingly close.
To
having a Hall of Fame candidacy, 2 or 3 more All-Pro seasons, and
if he doesn't have the knee injury,
you could make the case for him. He was that good. And that's something that in the moment, I don't know that I knew, and it was one of those things where when your linebacker is getting national commercial deals, and he's the Duracell man, it lets you know he's different. It's not, because it's not every day that linebackers get that kind of love. So it was kind of obvious that Patrick Willis was different, but Bowman was right there with him. He was, I don't want to say he was just as good, but he was in that stratosphere. It wasn't like a big, huge difference. And we had another guy like that, Spikes, he didn't defer to Patrick Willis. He used to talk about how good he was, but he's like, hey man, we're going to meet at the ball. I'm not deferring, because the system says that the mic makes all the plays, and the will is just kind of cleanup. He didn't play it like that. He just saw himself as 1B. So we had a lot of talent there, is what I'm saying. And to see Coach Singh, who, kind of gets shit on it here because he wasn't a great head coach, but man, he did a lot in terms of setting a culture here and also training those linebackers.
Yeah.
Patrick Willis, when he got here, Coach Singh famously said that he has all the things that, you can't teach, but none of the things that you can. He doesn't know how to play linebacker. But through Patrick Willis's work and his tutelage, they're standing there at the Hall of Fame together. So it was good to see him give him his flowers for that, because that's something that I recognized immediately, that, two of the best linebackers of the last 20 years have been molded by Mike Singletary. Patrick Willis and Ray Lewis have nothing but the highest of praise for him. And then his record as a player, speaks for itself. You can't tell the story of the NFL without Mike Singletary, the player. And I just, at the fact that our fan base doesn't really show him the respect that I think he's due, regardless of, he wasn't a great head coach.
Yeah.
He didn't do Alex Smith any favors. And I get all that. And that, those are all fair criticism. But I don't think you shit on the man, because he was a good man. He was a good position coach who maybe one could say was put in a situation that he wasn't ready for. Maybe he just wasn't a head coach. So again, those were just things that that heartened me to see this weekend.
Yeah, we have major love for Coach Singletary
here,
because he was running the show when we kind of started that Facebook page, and which created this podcast, and the idea that he expected more out of his players was not a false idea. It wasn't a bad idea. Maybe he didn't communicate it in the most personable way, or in the way that the athletes of the mid to late 2000s were going to respond necessarily, but it came out of the demeanor in which made him a great player. And, we've seen that a lot of times in athletics where, the great players aren't the best coaches, because it's almost like, here's what I did, and now you guys have to do it. And these players are like, yeah, but I'm not you. Like, there has to be more than just that. I just remember Magic Johnson when he was coaching the Lakers, and he's just like, you guys have to do that. And they're like, bro, like, you're the best point guard of all time.
Say, wait a minute. Magic is on the sidelines. Like, you didn't see that? No, I didn't. That's, because he was famous for seeing things 2 or 3 moves ahead. We don't see the game like that. Like you say, you talk about Larry Bird was saying, Barry Bonds is a hitting coach. I mean, you can't expect guys to be able to see things and do the things that you did. Now, you can expect them to put in the work, but, you guys were one of ones. You're the greatest. You are among, all those guys are the greatest on the list of the greatest to ever do it. You can't expect, Ty Lue to, run point like you did, Magic. That's just not realistic. He can't, so yeah, it's a dichotomy that you want those guys, but all of them to a man. I even heard Vernon talking about that,
Vernon, who was singled out the hardest. I actually, Vernon and Alex, I would guess you would say were singled out the hardest.
I've never heard Alex come around on Coach Singh, but Vernon definitely did. He was right. He was 100% right. But we're talking about a 40-year-old man. Now with experience, seeing that, being very appreciative for what Coach Singh did for him. By the way,
Vernon, that dude not only looks like he could still play,
man,
he should be like, I know he's doing acting, but this dude is handsome. he just looks like somebody.
And jacked. He is
Just great shape, man. Vernon,
yeah.
keep doing your thing, Vernon. By the way, shout out to Kenny 49ers who said, our trade history is not impressive, especially recently.
It
I
really
hope they
hasn't
can work
been.
it out for BA to stay. I think that's happening, by the way.
I hope so.
All right, let's change gears a little bit. I wanted to talk about some players who we are hopeful that they are on their way back from injury, though I think it's realistic that one or more may not be ready for the season to begin. So I kind of wanted to ask you about Dre, obviously Dre Greenlaw, Hufanga, and I don't know how much people necessarily are worried about this guy, but Drake Jackson also. All these guys are hurt, and the possibility for them to miss the season would mean that they would have to go on the PUP list and sit out 4 games, which in the cases of Dre and Hufanga, with those kind of injuries, that I think that's likely, or not necessarily likely, but you're like, okay, yeah, that Dre, like, his Achilles is on the jumping on the sidelines, but I'm also not sure the Niners have filled out Hufanga's spot. So for him to miss the beginning of the season, I think they'll be a little bare in the safety area, especially.
I think he's the closest, though. He's probably the closest, just based on the fact that when his injury happened, and he seemed to be moving pretty well in OTA. So I would think if I were to list it, it would be him, Dre. And I just think with an overabundance of caution, Dre might end up on the PUP. And I obviously haven't been out there, but apparently D Winters has been looking really good. So
yeah, I was gonna say, like, that's not the worst case scenario. If you're being protective of him, you want him to be healthier, and the extra 4 weeks can only help him. That sounds right to me.
You got Winters, you got Campbell. I don't, if he's right, I don't think that those are really a competition. I think that once he's ready, he slots right back in. But there's no reason to like rush him back. I mean, they're it looks like you have players who can fill the void until he's you're really really confident that he's healthy. So if it were me, okay, doctors clear him and he's ready. Now we're gonna give him an extra month just to to just work out and get his legs really under him, because there's no reason to rush it. September, him balling out in September, okay, that's fine, but we need him, for the long haul. So yeah,
I also, Drake Jackson, I can't imagine he's got too many opportunities
that's
left.
the most troubling.
Yeah,
he's the most troubling for sure.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. All right, last thing before we get out of here, I wanted to ask you, there are 2 49ers players featured on this Netflix receiver show. Now, I remember if we go back to the 2010 World Series season for the San Francisco Giants, you get the acclaim of winning the World Series. And the following season, Showtime decided to do a series to cover the team trying to go back to back. And what they would do is, they would follow the team for like a month or two, and then they would put together an episode that was kind of timely. So it's like, the Giants are, they're showing a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, and it's almost caught up to the normal season because of the way they edited it. Now, this Netflix series, it's all based on last year. So we know everything that happened. It's sort of retroactive to, George Kittle's birthday party, and they actually got Nick Bosa to come out and hang out. That's meaningful. It's kind of that stuff. The fact that there are 2 49ers on it makes me want to finish it. But I will say, the fact that there's nothing timely about it, I know how last season finished, and last
Mm-hmm.
season did not finish well for us. I don't know how many 49er fans are like, I can't wait to get to this and through this receiver series.
Yeah, and that's where I'm at with it. I'm like halfway through, but I'm not really watching it like that because I just think, and I said that to you when it first came out, even after the first episode, I don't think there's anything new for people who follow the team. Like we already know George is a real charismatic and fun and passionate guy that that is highlighted in the show, but that's not news to us. It's not news to us that him and his wife are super close and that that she is a big part of his motivation. That's not new to us. I mean, we know that. I see Zenny billboards all over the place with both of them, and she does commercials and shit here in the Bay Area. So I mean,
It's pretty impressive that she was a hooper back in school.
Yeah,
because she's pretty
exactly.
tall, and then she puts on them heels, and I'm like, man, you're taller than everybody else on this show.
And that that was the dynamic that I thought was funny is that when they met, she was like the star athlete. I mean, he was just a guy on scholarship. He hadn't made a name for himself at all, but she was a baller. So that's good on him for that. But yeah, and then it's cool to see. I guess the thing that you don't necessarily know about Debo is you just see him with his family and his kids. That's cool for 20 minutes. But I mean, I don't need to see
Debo is not necessarily a great quote. Like he's not going to say anything that's going to make you laugh or make you smile or like go, oh, that's kind of interesting. He's just a straight up dude. Like he's just he's like, yeah, that's just Debo. So I thought it was interesting that he was one of the guys on it. Well, because the flip side is St. Brown. He actually is a really good quote. He actually does say stuff. Going, his pops, the weight, the
power lifter,
bodybuilder, or whatever. Yeah. Like having that as your pops was very interesting, and I think he's also biracial himself. So talking about that is always interesting to me, being someone who's also biracial. But yeah, so I think I will eventually get through it, but if you're a 49ers fan and you're like, oh man, Kittle and Debo are in this show, there's really nothing to it that would get you to just want to. I'm actually more interested in Justin Jefferson and Devontae Adams because I don't really know as much about them. And I can't wait to. I imagine
does not hold his tongue, boy.
Well, that's what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for him. Yeah,
he is an outspoken dude, and that I think I'm with Bill Simmons in that we need more of that. We don't need these high profile college players being taken to media consultants and taught not to say anything that is the least bit controversial or inflammatory. We don't need any more of that. We all could use a little bit more Anthony Edwards in our life.
Are you watching any Olympics?
I am. I am. I've watched the basketball, I guess, but I find myself just watching hours of I don't know if anybody saw it, and I freely admit I was here balling. There was there was a match today where this lady from Spain and this lady from China were playing, and the lady from Spain blew out her knee. And she was just sobbing uncontrollably. They worked 4 years to get here, and apparently she'd had the injury before. So, the narrative is that she knew exactly what it was. Yeah. So she strapped it back up and she tried to continue, but she couldn't. And she was just inconsolable. And I was sitting here in tears because I could feel that shit. She was hurt. So yeah, you see things like that. Katie Ledecky is amazing. Simone Biles is amazing.
The Golden Girls.
Obviously, I watch it from a very American-centric point of view. But yeah, the Olympics are cool, and I found myself this week caring and tuning in to shit that I normally wouldn't care about at all. Because it's just the pageantry. Paris looks amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a they do it. It's a really good show. It's a
You
really
know,
good show.
watching it, and to kind of get back to football here, they can't do anything football related in the Olympics, pro football related, because
Hmm.
it's just too close to the start of the season.
Hmm.
Now that sport, pro football, is way too hard on the body to even
Hmm.
try and do a 2 week scenario. But I do think flag football would work
Hmm.
in the Olympics.
Absolutely.
You would have to sort of figure out who could be a part of it, because also you don't want college football players taking time away from, because college football, as hard
Hmm.
as it is to do this, but maybe there are semi-pro flag football leagues or ex-pro flag football. Like, imagine the big three. If the big three was your 3-on-3, and like there are ways to do it. I watched the 3-on-3, and I'm like, Jimmer for
Those dudes are everybody in that 3-on-3 is cash. They just shoot the lights out.
yeah,
It's
I'm like, yeah,
crazy.
like that, wouldn't it be interesting to really take that 3-on-3 seriously? And nothing against Jimmer Fredette. Like, I'm sure
And
he's
Canyon Berry. I mean,
like,
that,
let's put the real, like, some real guys out there. I think you could turn that thing into something. The women's team, I know, didn't play very well either, but at least the idea was to have Cameron Brink on the team before she hurt her knee. That would have been a nice thing. I don't know if that would have made them that better. But yeah, like, I just saw, I was like, flag football could actually work
mhm.
at this level. And I think the 3-on-3 could work better than it currently does. But yeah. So Saturday, Niners play their first game against Tennessee. I think we will be. Oh, so Papa J just said in 2028, flag football will be in the Olympics. There we
Oh, that's
go.
dope.
That's great. That'll be great.
Preseason, I'm putting my bid in now. Raj, you need to go ahead and get the Niners on that Sao Paulo preseason schedule, because that seems like a blast. I
Yeah.
mean, that just I just want to go to Sao Paulo just to go. But yeah, I didn't when I heard it was announced that they got a game. I didn't realize it was a preseason game.
Yeah.
That's bananas.
Yeah. So next Saturday, we haven't even talked about this, but I think we expect to record at some point next weekend. It could be after Saturday. I haven't really checked my schedule yet, but
Mhm.
we'll get back into doing our post game stuff. Like, it's almost like from here on out, we'll be doing weekly stuff, which is pretty fun to think about. So we'll be back
Absolutely.
on a weekly cadence going through. I mean, if it was like last year, going through mid-February every week, having a
I
show.
hope so. I really really hope so. It's gonna be, you know, like I said, I feel kind of out of the loop. Last year I went to all 9 practices, so I had a pretty good feel for what the team was looking like and where the strengths and weaknesses were. The offensive line looked like a problem. Um, I don't know. There was a point during I was all in on Steve Wilkes because the way he worked with the DBs, they seemed more aggressive. That kind of didn't work out. I would have loved to have seen the byplay and the interaction of Staley and Sorensen and how that looks. And I'm not expecting the defense to look any different. I think we run what Kyle wants run. But yeah, I missed not being out there. I had made the determination I probably wasn't gonna go all 9 times. That was kind of
That
ridiculous.
was a lot last year.
That was crazy getting down to the South Bay um every day by 10 o'clock, so you right in the teeth of the traffic. So it was nuts. But not going at all, I kind of I missed it. But yeah, I'm really cautiously optimistic about this season, and you know, I think that all of the drama gets somehow wrapped up. I think Trent will be in the fold. I know he'll be in the
Yeah,
fold. I
let's
think
like
BA will
after
be
the
here.
last preseason game, I think Trent's going to be signed. The
Yeah.
BA one is a little different, but I just think it's all posturing and bluffing and poker. And at some point, the Niners are going to. I think that what would happen is, unfortunately, if they get this deal done months ago, they're in better shape than they are now by having to get this deal done because they've gotten jumped over like 4 times by new contracts.
That's the thing, is that you have to get these deals done because the number is not going down. It's never going to be less than it is now. It's always going to be more.
Yeah.
So that's why I have been pounding the table about the Niners working out the structure of Brock's deal and getting that. I would sign him right at the end of the regular season before the playoffs, because what I don't want to have happen is I don't want Dak to sign and then be trying to negotiate that deal, because again, we've never had a quarterback of Dak's caliber be unrestricted in the market. You know, we had my man Kirk, the Hall of Famer in the bank, get there, but nobody, you know, you say what you want about Dak and his postseason struggles. He is a really good quarterback, and there are going to be teams that want him and
You're
need
gonna
him.
win 9 or 10 games with Dak
Yeah,
as long
you
as you
know.
have a formidable football team.
Now, are you gonna, you know, what are you gonna do in the playoffs? That remains to be seen. But the Giants will be in on him. The Raiders, they have Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew. They'll be in on him. The Cowboys will be in on him. That those 3 franchises alone, Tampa Bay could end up, depending on what happens with Baker, they could be in on him. The Saints could be in on him. So I mean, a guy like that being completely unrestricted, he's gonna dwarf Mahomes' contract on a per year basis. And you just don't, you want to be upstream of that. You do not want to, because you know, we can start to have that argument about what is Brock worth really. I think to the 49ers, he is worth being the highest paid quarterback in the league for so many reasons. On the field, off the field. And you got fucking Opie Cunningham right here with you on your team. If you know, the whole make the quarterback great again market, you got that on lock. You got to get him signed. So, and I hope he breaks the bank. You
Yep.
know, I'm not one of those people that say, well, if he has a bad season, man, it don't matter what he does this year. He's gonna get paid, you know, and he's deserved it.
And he's handling it like all of his quotes are exactly what you want him to say. Focused on this season. We have a high caliber of expectation in this building. I need to worry about improving. I'm not even worried about the contract. Like he's saying everything right.
I'm not saying that he isn't real, but he does a very good job of staying on brand. He is always on brand. And I'm not saying that it's calculated. I'm not necessarily saying it's calculated, but from his endorsements to his press availability to, you know, the things that he does, it is all things that, you know, Brock Purdy drinks milk and Brock Purdy's in bed at 8:00 and Brock, you know, that
wearing his blue blockers to block out the phone
and you
light.
know, and I'm not mad at him because that is going to serve him well off the field and on the field. And you know that about me. Maybe the audience doesn't. I'm all about the players getting paid. I want them to get all the money that they gonna get. I want it to be as much of it as possible guaranteed. So I'm rooting for him. You know, some of you guys, some of these fans, they be ridiculous with their Brock nonsense, but I don't have a problem with him as a player. I love him as a player. the stands though can be crazy.
Yeah.
Anytime you talk about throwing Montana in that come on now. Let's pump the brakes a little bit on that. But I love him as a player, and I want all the good things for him and this team, because at this point, as this team goes. Josh Dobbs has shown he could play in this league, but there's a significant drop off from Josh Dobbs, from Brock Purdy to Josh Dobbs in this system.
If Brock got hurt again, Kyle might be trying to make that call to Brady to come.
Oh my God, he is so, in such a short time, he has become so integral.
Yeah,
what it is we do here.
Look, and here's another thing, like Jimmy G is probably expecting a phone call from Brock saying, "Thank you, because all I had to do was be a little bit better than you." And I was right there with the fans. The fans loved me because I was just better than Jimmy.
Yeah, I mean, and that's not nothing. The Jimmy bar is not low. He played.
Yeah,
Jimmy
got us to the Super Bowl.
We did well with Jimmy Garoppolo, and there was a market difference between those other schmucks that we had and Jimmy Garoppolo. And that was the thing that was always frustrating me with your fans. Well, we are 40 and blah, blah, blah. When Jimmy plays, well, he's a competent NFL quarterback. Nick Mullins and, CJ Beathard were not. So he's better than, I will give you that. He is better than them.
Where is Jimmy this year, by the way?
Suspended. But I think, is he still a Raider? I don't think so. I don't know where he is. I know he's suspended for, I think, the first 4 games. But yeah, that was wild what my man said, Devontae Adams said about that dude starting. He was like, nah, Jimmy Garoppolo is done in this town. Oh, he's the Rams backup.
He's a Rams backup, and he got suspended for performance-enhancing substances.
Yeah, I mean, they love Jimmy in Vegas, boy. Jimmy is still a fan favorite in Las Vegas, especially in those adult those adult establishments. Jimmy has a reputation in town of being a very good tipper.
So what's interesting about this is so what Jimmy actually got suspended for was a TUE, meaning a therapeutic use exemption. So he was given like a doctor's note to utilize testosterone. And what's actually interesting about that is a lot of times when guys are given TUEs, I mean, there could be a few different reasons, but how they kind of manipulated their way into TUEs, and this happened a lot in mixed martial arts, is they kind of abused steroids, and what happened is their body wasn't making the testosterone anymore because they kind of abused it. So then they go, "Hey doc, I'm naturally low for testosterone," because their testosterone just wasn't creating anymore.
Just wasn't making it anymore.
And then so then you go to the doctor and you get the note, and the doctor just gives you testosterone to boost you back up to normal levels. And so that's how a lot of the MMA fighters would gimmick the testosterone stuff and the therapeutic use exemption. I'm not saying that that's what Jimmy did, because if Jimmy was doing that, he would probably be a little bit bigger than he is. Not that he's a small dude, but yeah, that's how sort of where my mind goes when I see TUE. And so it's kind of the doctor's note version. There could be a medical reason that I can't, I'm trying to think of what the medical reason would be to give him a TUE, but
he's a young man. He's only 32 years old.
32.
He shouldn't be, his testosterone shouldn't be.
You know what, though?
I mean, I guess I shouldn't say it shouldn't be, because it could be something hereditary.
Yeah, the thing about testosterone today. Now, I think the NFL. I have a problem with the NFL's drug policy. I think most sports drug policies are actually very flawed purposely. But if I went to the doctor and I gave him some symptoms, and my testosterone was, I'm a little bit older, so I could probably get testosterone if I wanted
Mhm.
just by saying, oh, I don't feel great or whatever. But you can actually really get docs to sign off on that stuff these days because there's so many different clinics and stuff that are really just out now. I know people who are on it, and I'm just like, why are you on it? You're like in great health, and they're like, I don't know, it just makes me feel good, and I'm like, I
Mhm.
guess. So, yeah, that's a different story for a different day. But I'm kind of interested in that Jimmy story now. All right, so we'll be back next week with our first kind of post game recap. Like we said, the preseason is not the preseason as when we were younger, so there's not a whole bunch of takeaways, but it'll just be an excuse to talk about the progress of this team. We'll get to see some rookies, Ricky Pearsall, and I guess Garendo is who I really wanted to see with this new kickoff rule, but he's hurt, so we won't see him. Like I said, Dirty Dom Puny looks like he's going to get
He's
some
gonna
first
play.
team reps.
Mhm.
First team reps. So
Mhm.
we'll have some context to what the team could be at least a little bit next week. So, all right, for Rod, I am Double G. We will see you when we see you. Peace out.